Deputy Speaker, and it is a real pleasure and honour to follow the Honourable Member for Glasgow North West, because I think she speaks with a real authority about these issues and speaks also very eloquently, and I'm very glad to follow her. I'm happy to speak as well in my capacity as the chair of the cross-party parliamentary group on nuclear disarmament. Let me put on the record at the very top of my speech that I'm very happy to pay tribute to the submariners and their service for this country, and indeed for their families and the sacrifice that their families make, which the Honourable Member has set out very, very clearly. But I don't think there's any contradiction between paying tribute to that service and also being very clear that, for me, nuclear weapons are abhorrent. Others have said during this debate that it's inconsistent to have a nuclear deterrent if you're not prepared to use it. I absolutely agree with that, and I'm very proud to say that I would not, under any circumstances, use nuclear weapons. Still less would I support the Prime Minister's position of a first use of nuclear weapons. I believe that nuclear weapons are indiscriminate, they are illegal, and they are obscene. Let us just think what that first strike, which the Prime Minister was so proud not to rule out, what that could really mean. The heart of a nuclear explosion reaches a temperature of several million degrees centigrade. Over a wide area, the resulting heat flash literally vaporises all human tissues. At Hiroshima, within a radius of half a mile, only the remains of most of the people caught in the open, the only remains of them were their shadows burnt into stone. People inside buildings will be indirectly killed by the blast and the heat effects as buildings collapse and all inflammable materials burst into flames. Immediate death rate in that area will be over 90%. Individual fires will combine to produce a firestorm as all the oxygen is consumed. As the heat rises, air is drawn in from the periphery at or near ground level. This results in a lethal hurricane-force winds, as well as perpetuating the fire as the fresh oxygen is burnt. The contamination, Madam Deputy Speaker, will continue potentially for hundreds of thousands of years. Red Cross has estimated 1 billion people around the world could face starvation as a result of a nuclear war. So let us be very clear. I hate all war, but there is something particular about nuclear war, and simply saying that it's in the same category as other forms of war, I think, is wrong. I think what is wrong as well is to say that we can't uninvent things that have already been invented. We have seen what has happened when it comes to chemical weapons that have been banned, biological weapons have been banned, cluster munitions have been banned. And if there was more of a support from countries like the UK, I believe that nuclear weapons could be banned as well. Because there was that international ban treaty, the UN Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons Treaty. And I do find it absolutely outrageous, frankly, that the UK government couldn't even be bothered to turn up to the talks. You know, that was a campaign that was run throughout the world. It had 122 countries that have supported that nuclear ban treaty. The organisation, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, won the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts. The treaty is a strong and comprehensive text. It has the potential to achieve a world without nuclear weapons. It opened for signature in September 2017. It enters into force when we have 50 states ratified. So far it's been signed by 70 states, it's ratified by 22, and more are signing up. And I will in 2 seconds, but I want to counter the argument that was made from the benches alongside me that it is somehow not multilateral. I believe it is multilateral, not least because there is no requirement for a country to join it. There's no requirement on them to have foregone their nuclear weapons before they join. And if the UK had used its considerable clout on the world stage to have really shown some leadership on this, I believe there could have at least been a chance of getting countries around the table to have gone away and then begun that process multilaterally to get rid of their weapons. But I give way.
Thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. It's very critical of the United Kingdom in this respect. But did Russia, China, France, the United States, in other words, the declared nuclear weapon states, did they attend? Isn't it surely not another cul-de-sac, whereas the real way of reducing and then eliminating nuclear weapons is negotiations, primarily initially between Russia and the United States, but then involving all of the nuclear weapon states? Is that not real politics rather than gesture politics?
If the honourable gentleman really thinks that 122 countries around the world are engaging in gesture politics, then I would suggest to him perhaps it's more the gesture from him than it is from them. And I believe in Britain actually taking a leadership role. Perhaps that's not something that he does believe in, but I believe that that is what we should do, and the constant sitting back and waiting for something else to happen, doing what I believe is the wrong thing, would be, frankly, unconscionable. And, you know, it's very easy to characterise those of us who are against nuclear weapons as somehow not living in the real world. So perhaps I can just remind the House that there are plenty of people within the military world themselves who do not think nuclear weapons are a useful tool going forward. Back in 2014, senior military, political and diplomatic figures, and on the diplomacy side, there were people like the former Conservative Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, former Defence Secretary Des Brown, former Foreign Secretary Lord Owen. They came together with very high-ranking military personnel to say that they believe that the risks posed by nuclear weapons and the international dynamics that could lead to nuclear weapons being used are being underestimated and that they are insufficiently understood by world leaders. Now, the government's main argument for replacing Trident appears to be that it's the ultimate insurance in an uncertain world. What I would argue is that what they fail to acknowledge is that it is our very possession of nuclear weapons that is making that world more uncertain. Nor have the advocates of nuclear weapons ever explained why, if Trident is so vital to protecting us, that it is not also the case for every other country in the world. The Minister did not answer when I put to him earlier, at the beginning of this debate, that seems a long time ago now, he did not answer when I said to him that we have no moral arguments to put to other countries to seek not to acquire nuclear weapons if we ourselves are not only keeping them, but upgrading them. And I put it to him again that a world in which a world in which every country is striving and potentially achieving nuclear weapons would be an awful lot more dangerous than the world we have today.
Just try the question again. If we were to give up our nuclear weapons, which other countries that possess nuclear weapons would follow suit? Does she know how many nuclear warheads have been reduced as a result of our reducing our nuclear warhead totals unilaterally? The answer is a big, fat zero.
Precisely why one needs international processes like the UN treaty that I've described, supported by 122 countries, in order to make this happen. Although I am personally in favour of unilateral nuclear disarmament, that is not the case I'm making this afternoon. I am moving one step towards people like himself, honourable members like himself, right honourable members like himself perhaps, I can't remember, who I completely understand are not ever going to be persuaded about unilateral nuclear disarmament, but whom I hope might be willing to engage in a serious argument about multilateral nuclear disarmament. Mr. Speaker, I'm so sorry. The last point I want to make, because time is getting on, is simply that there's also been very little recognition so far in this debate, I think, about the fact that nuclear weapon systems are themselves fallible. According to a shocking report by Chatham House, there have been 13 incidents since 1962 in which nuclear weapons have been very nearly launched. One of the most dramatic in 1983 was when Stanislav Petrov, the duty officer in a Soviet nuclear war early warning centre, found his system warning of the launch of 5 US missiles. Now, after a few moments of agonising it, he judged, thankfully and correctly, to be a false alarm. If he had reached a different conclusion and passed the information up the control chain, it could have triggered the firing of nuclear missiles from Russia.
I will. Lady for giving way. Parliamentary questions I asked uncover the very shocking facts that since 2006 there have been 789 nuclear safety incidents at Coalport and Fastlane, and half of the incidents at Fastlane have taken place in just the last 4 years. Would she agree that really this is a very serious worry, that nuclear safety incidents are on the rise under the watch of a government that shouldn't have control of a TV remote, let alone the most dangerous weapons on the planet?
Thank you for her intervention, and I think she rightly shines a spotlight on issues that far too rarely actually get covered in the media or even covered in the debate that we're talking about today. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I think the UK government has shamefully refused to participate in the treaty negotiations I've been describing, while nevertheless claiming it shares the goal of a nuclear weapons-free world. But it's not too late to make amends. The government should now engage constructively and work towards signing that treaty and supporting the global moves towards the total elimination of nuclear weapons. Unlike a willingness to launch nuclear weapons and incinerate millions of innocent people, or to waste billions on a weapon that will never be used and therefore serves no evident purpose, that, I believe, would be the true test of a Prime Minister's leadership.
Wayne David.
Yeah.